Hi, I'm Scott Wright, CEO of ClickArmor. ClickArmor brings to you a brand new podcast called Can I Be Phished? And the idea of the Can I Be Phished podcast is pretty cool because I don't think anybody is really doing this, and it's something that everybody needs. If you've ever taken a security awareness training course, you've probably been told, be very careful watching for suspicious emails. Don't click on suspicious links and don't accept anything from suspicious senders. Well, that's all great, but how do you know what is suspicious? And that's what we're going to dig into in every episode of the Can I Be Phished podcast. We're going to look into different emails and threats and understand how to analyze them, kind of an unboxing of phishing emails. So that's one important part of the podcast, and that's the part I really wanted to bring a lot of value to you every time. In that respect. Another aspect of the Can I Be Phished podcast that I think is going to be really important is to be able to bring new insights on security and security awareness through inviting special guests. So in this episode, we've got Adam Crate, who is a VP of Business Services at Grade A, which is a managed service provider here in Ottawa. So a really interesting discussion with Adam about security threats to businesses. So that's kind of the structure we're going to use from now on for the Can I Be Phished podcast. Love to get your input, love to get your likes and shares and spread the word that we're trying to bring real value to people to understand how to actually analyze these threats that everybody says be careful about. So the system that I generally am going to be using as we approach each email that we analyze will be to do a 4-step, what I call phishing checklist. Number 1 is going to be the Gutfeld garbage check. That just means if we can at all eliminate the message as being legitimate, then you do that. But attackers are getting pretty good at this stuff, so we're going to have to go further. We're going to have to check things like the sender sanity, the link elusiveness, and the body believability. So those will be the steps that we'll go through. So without further ado, let's get into our first message for analysis. And I hope you enjoy it and love to hear your feedback. Okay, so I'm going to start with a relatively simple phishing message. And for people just listening and not watching the video, it's a customer service kind of thing saying, your account appears to be missing or have incorrect information. So we need you to update that information. That's the typical kind of common general phishing message that will be sent out to a lot of people and hoping that a few people respond to it. For most of us, we could probably look at this and say, yeah, this is a phishing email within a few seconds. But I'm going to use the fact that this is a simple message to show you that even simple messages have some value in terms of learning about phishing. So I'm going to start using our system, which is the Gutfeld garbage check. And that is, if I have a quick look at the whole look and feel of this message, I may or may not decide, I don't need to act on this. And you're probably going to be safe. On the other hand, sometimes if you throw out every message that looks a little bit suspicious, then you might be missing real ones. And certainly if it's important, hopefully the person will repeatedly try to get a hold of you. But in the case of looking at potentially suspicious messages, what you'll see right now on the screen, if you're able to view this on video, is a relatively sparse looking email. And the reason is I haven't loaded any images. And I wanted to mention this as a best practice. Typically, I recommend not setting your email program to preload images. And what that means is that when you get an email, you don't see the pictures or images that the original sender intended to have in there. And in that case, most email programs will have some link or a button somewhere that says load remote content or load images. And in my Mac right now, I'm showing you this on up in the top right, I have a button that says load remote content. And the reason that I set this up is that when an attacker sends you a phishing message or even a spammer, they want to know whether or not this email address is still alive and being used. And it's a really easy thing for them to include an image that's actually sitting on their web server. And if your email program loads all images immediately, it will go and get that image from the web server of the attacker. And that immediately tells the attacker that the email address they sent that message to is still alive and valid. And that's of value to them because that means they'll be able to try again with you, but they can also sell their list of recently validated email addresses. So it's a good thing, good practice to turn off preloading of messages, just so it kind of tends to reduce the number of spam and phishing messages you will receive. So that's the first comment. So if we go back to our gut feel garbage check, I think there's nothing terribly obvious about this message, although you might say, well, the sender, which is just the word service in lowercase, and the subject line is Amazon in lowercase, that might jump out at you and say, you know what, this really doesn't look like anything from Amazon, so I'm going to ignore it. And you'd probably be right. But I'm going to treat this one as a message that we feel we probably have to evaluate the entire thing. And with that, I'm going to say, okay, the garbage check, I'm going, yeah, maybe we pass that. So we'll move on to what I call the sender sanity check. So we'll go up to the sender information, the sender name. And as I said, it's service in lowercase. Now this message appears to be from Amazon. So with that context, looking at the sender, who is the sender? Well, we know it's supposed to be Amazon, but if Amazon was really sending us a message, we expect them to put, something meaningful and, in line with their brand right at the beginning. And that is, rather than the word service, you'd expect something to say it's coming from Amazon. And the subject line itself is Amazon, all in lowercase. Again, if Amazon was trying to send you something, we're going to talk about that in a minute. It may or may not be the right thing. So the sender information starts with the name that is visible. But the other thing that you keep in mind is that you often need to double check who the sender is in terms of their email address. And a lot of people don't realize you can click on the sender name to find out information about the sender's email address. And depending on what email program you're using, you might either get that information by hovering over the sender's name or by clicking on it once, or sometimes even you might have to click on it twice, like a double click. In my Mac mail, all I have to do is click on the little arrow right beside the name, and it shows me that the sender's email address is email.service@amazon.com. So what I really am looking at right now is the amazon.com domain, and that is something that would tell us, is the sender really from a reputable source? Now, there are ways that attackers can spoof or change that name. It's not as easy as it might seem to do that, but it is possible. And in this case, the sender's email address looks reliable, looks reputable. If it was not, then I would immediately throw out this email. That's the main point of analyzing the sender's email right here. Okay, so we've looked at the sender's email. We might say, you know what, it's still a reputable email address here from Amazon.com. So I'm going to continue analyzing by going to what I call the link elusiveness test. And that is looking at all the links in the email itself. And if I hover over different places that look like they might have links, there's the image that didn't load. There's no link there. It could have been hyperlinked. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to look at the place that says verify now. We call it a call to action. That's what they really want you to click on, or what they want you to do. And when I hover over that, it's really interesting because you'll see it says not anything about Amazon. It actually says HTTPS, which is secure, but kemenag-basel.com/WP includes class WP customizes.php. So that's a whole string that has nothing in it about Amazon. So that's a little bit of a red flag, because if Amazon was really sending me something, you'd expect the link to go somewhere that resembles Amazon. So they haven't even tried here. So that's an indicator right there that this link is really not reliable. And then something else to notice about the links, down at the bottom in the footer, you often see that they might put a link to the real site in their footer to make it look more realistic. And if you only checked that footer and the links in it, you would see Amazon.com. Well, this must be a valid email, so I'm going to click on the verify now. So one tip is always check the link that you're about to click, not just the footers or any information about the person sending. So that's the link check, and I would say the call to action is suspicious. So I would throw out this email at this point, if not earlier. Finally, the body believability test, and that is looking at the content in the body carefully to decide if this is believable or not. And the message says, "Dear customer, some informations on your account appears to be missing or incorrect. Please update your account informations promptly so that you can continue to enjoy all the benefits of your Amazon account. If you don't update your informations within 72 hours, we'll limit what you can do with your Amazon account. Simply click on the web address below, and then there's the Verify Now button. Thank you for your concern," which sounds a little bit odd. "Sincerely, Amazon Services Team." So we've seen a couple of grammar errors consistently reproduced here, which likely wouldn't happen in an official email from the Amazon customer service department. It's possible that you can get typos that proofreaders missed. So I wouldn't say that it's always suspicious just because there's a typo. But this is consistently using the wrong word, which is really suspicious. And "thank you for your concern" sounds odd too. So that tells me that's a suspicious set of content. So this was a simple email, but it allowed me to show you the different parts of an email that I think you should address. And within the ClickArmor product, when we have the Gone Phishing course, if you were to take that course, you would learn a lot more about how to analyze each of these elements in a fun way, actually, in the gamified platform. So that's the method that we will use from now on going forward. And each time we look at a new message, you'll see some different angles that we can use to analyze the different elements. So that's it for this analysis. That was a pretty simple email to analyze, but I think it gives you an idea of how we should be approaching this stuff. And we're going to use a similar process every time so that you can remember what to do. Stay tuned for our discussion with Adam Crate coming up shortly. The Can I Be Phished podcast is brought to you by ClickArmor, which is the first gamified learning platform that helps build cyber herd immunity in a business through engagement of employees to actually arm themselves to defend against cyber attacks. And we do this using gamified learning challenges, gamified exercises, and gamified assessments that give you the data that you've never had before about your business's vulnerability. So please check out clickarmor.ca, explore our resources, and try our Can I Be Phished self-assessment. You'll see that it's really an innovative way to actually engage people and change their behavior. All right, I have with me now Adam Crate, who's the VP of Business Services at Grade A, which is a managed service provider here in Ottawa. So welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, great to have you. And I just wondered if you could start by giving a little bit of a background on Grade A, the company, and then a bit about your role and what you do there.
Yeah, so Grade A managed service company here in Ottawa. We've been around for almost 20 years. Serving small, mid-sized companies throughout the Ottawa region and surrounding areas. And we provide full IT outsourcing services. But a big part of what we focus on is the strategic aspects of providing IT services. So making sure that organizations understand their roadmap, where they are now, where they want to be. And we do that from a strategic management design. So looking at what are the goals of the organization and align IT to those goals, as opposed to looking at IT first.
Oh, cool. That's
and
good.
Security,
So you do a bit of an interview process when you bring on a new customer then?
100%. We have a what we call the 100-day plan. And this is the first 100 days of working with a new organization. And that's developing that strategic roadmap. It starts with a operating maturity assessment. So we look at their different areas of maturity, from IT, governance to networking and security, and many other areas. We do stakeholder interviews and look at a number of different aspects to really understand where they're trying to take their organization. We often find a lot of groups have what we call innovation debt. They've neglected, often there's technical debt or management debt. We look at innovation debt, and organizations often have neglected to, I don't want to say spend, but invest in certain areas of their company. And that's why they usually come to us. We can help them get back on track and get to where they want to be.
Interesting. That sounds kind of like, to me, I have this vision of the client being in this shiny object syndrome. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then without thinking about how that might affect their future IT
Yeah,
infrastructure.
that happens all the time, and it is something that I walk into very often. Is someone comes to us and says, "Hey, we know we're behind. We need to be ahead, but we want to implement this new technology.
Yeah.
This is a really cool technology, and I would love to implement it for them." But what they often forget, and it's on all areas of within IT, is we look at 5 different levels of maturity. And this item that they may want to implement could be on level 4 or 5, top of the scale from a maturity perspective, and they have yet to accomplish some of the most basic, essential things. And it's sometimes difficult to help people understand you have to build the foundation before we can build the roof. Uh, and that's true in all areas, whether it be your business continuity planning, your IT, and so on.
How many clients does Grade A have right now?
So we have a couple hundred clients that we fully manage, and they range in size from small organizations of about 10 staff to groups of several hundred. We tend to focus on professional groups. So they could be lawyers, in finance and accounting, engineering professionals. Being in Ottawa, there's a lot of NGOs that we work with, charities and
Oh yeah,
not-for-profits, and those kind of types of groups, professional associations.
interesting. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So so what would your role be within Grade 80 then?
So as the VP of Business Services, I manage a couple of different groups. One of them being we have a service called our virtual CIO. So something I had done myself for many years before starting to manage the team. And we go into these groups and act as that CIO individual, CIO, CTO type role, where we're helping these small mid groups who typically don't have the budget for a full-time CIO. It's and not necessarily required full-time. So we play that role and help develop the plans and strategies with the stakeholders, with the business owners of these groups, and help move them along their journey, their path, their vision to what IT means to them.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
So some of the questions I was thinking would be great to have you discuss for our audience is what kinds of things have you seen the pandemic impact on your client base? Like what were things like beforehand and what is it like now?
Definitely a number of things. Many groups that we work with, we've already been preparing them for remote work and had been doing remote work. However, a lot in their business continuity and disaster recovery planning never anticipated a 100% work from home scenario. The cost of implementing that outweighed the potential value, although the ones that did plan for it are very happy that they had. And a few had to catch up quite quickly. But one of the things that I definitely noticed is business continuity took precedence over every other decision for a good month or two. Mm-hmm. Organizations and we work with many other groups and partners, other MSPs like us across North America that we talk to, and they've said the same thing, where you may not want to allow someone to connect their personal device to the corporate network over VPN, and they never would have done this before, but it was being allowed so that they could work. So little things like that, business continuity taking precedence over security, over other policies that never would have been allowed previously.
Right. And how do you think that's affected security in general?
It's definitely had an impact. And there's other things where the security is just people are more vulnerable at home. Even if they're on a properly managed device from their office, they often don't have the same protection. They're not behind the firewall with the protections of the firewall at home. And I've noticed that people tend to be a little bit more, what do I want to call it? Maybe a little bit more click happy at home than when they're in the office.
It's a good term. I love that.
You know, if you get a phishing message which everyone does probably almost on a daily basis. When you're in the office, you can quickly talk to the person next to you. Hey, did you get this? Is this
Exactly.
safe?
Yeah.
And when you're not at home, that behavior goes away.
Yeah.
And that's another big part that we've seen across many different areas of this working from home is business processes have changed.
Right. Right.
Things as simple as someone has to do a wire transfer, a legitimate wire transfer, their process for that doesn't work anymore because they can't go talk to the person and they can't get in touch with people as easily. So these things are now changing. We always recommend any kind of wire transfer. It's a request by email. Talk to the person. Make sure it's legitimate. I don't know how many times we hear stories, small and large, across the globe of something that could have just been confirmed with a simple phone call. To prevent an issue.
And I think I've just to throw in one of my observations recently, I heard about, a contractor working with the federal government, and, the boss wanted them to have entrust certificates, right, to do encryption within their public key infrastructure. And that's all fine. They had a laptop to work from, but the actual process of getting the certificate approved and installed requires a face-to-face handoff of a shared secret to verify that the person we're giving it to actually is the person that you want it to be. And they said, the instructions were, you must hand this off face-to-face. And they go, is this still required during the pandemic? Because that's not happening, right? That kind of process, the way I've been describing it to people is, a lot of security processes are bent, if not broken right now, just because of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we are, one of our top recommended items for any organization is to implement things like MFA. And we tend to do a lot of white glove service when it comes to implementing MFA, hand-holding people through it so they understand how it works and how to properly get through the glitches. And because of that hand-holding, we've had to develop new ways of implementing it fully remotely, especially when groups want to use. They don't want a phone. They don't want a text message. They want a key fob. And those become a little bit more complicated. It's hard to get people set up on those when we're not in front of them anymore. So it's definitely changing the ways that we're implementing security solutions and helping manage our clients.
Are many of them using like Google Authenticator apps on their phones?
So a good chunk of our clients, at least, are in Office 365 or Microsoft 365. So for the most part, they're using the Microsoft Authenticator app.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering what percentage of them would actually need a physical fob?
I would say 0 need it.
Okay.
Some just want it because for different reasons they don't want, or an employee may not want to use their phone, whether it be a policy internally, or there are still people out there who do not have smartphones. We run into it every now and then. They have an old style flip phone and it just won't work. But that's, thankfully, it is the rare. It's pretty rare when we can't use the online authenticator solutions.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So I've seen in the news and I've heard anecdotes, but I just wanted to sort of get your view on it. The surge in phishing and social engineering attacks. Are you seeing that at the level that the media is portraying it?
Absolutely. We're definitely seeing increases all over the board. And what really bothers me is how we're seeing these increased attacks playing on people's fears around COVID. So phishing using the subject of COVID, or here's the relief you need, or whatever it might be. So we're definitely seeing that. And it's a shame already that people are, taking advantage of people by phishing, but then using this moment when people might be a little bit more susceptible because they're not sure, they're not thinking maybe the same way that they would have before, and falling victim, unfortunately, these types of
it's kind of like you said, they're click happy, right? I mean, it's the way I had been talking to people about it was, there's this real desire for information, right? Whether it's about the pandemic itself and how it affects themselves or their families, or about the office, processes, or the updates on human resources policies, or even help desk stuff, right? So any information that is offered, people kind of want, and we have to try and teach them to be a little bit careful about it.
Yeah, we've just to try and help our clients, we've developed a page on our site specifically for directing people to the resources available around COVID, and
Okay.
it's really redirecting them to government sites,
Yeah.
both federal and provincial.
Awesome. That's good. Any favorite attacks that you've seen that just make you think, wow, we really need to help people understand this stuff?
Honestly, there's some really cool attacks that I'm not too worried most of our clients are going to be susceptible to. Things like I was listening to reading an article about it was an organization in the UK where they had sent an email requesting a wire transfer. I think it was a law firm, and then the person who requested it then sent a voicemail, called and left a voicemail for the person confirming, yeah, I just sent you the email. Please go ahead with the wire transfer. Well, that voicemail was faked. It was
Wow.
what do they call it now? Deep fakes. So they had faked
Oh,
the
right.
person's voice because this was
Really?
a
Holy cow.
person online. And yeah, when I was at the RSA conference, feels like forever ago, back in March, I was talking to some groups that are now building security solutions around this.
Yep.
So I find it really fascinating. I'm not too worried about the small, mid-sized businesses worrying about this just yet.
Yeah.
For me, it's focus on the essentials, the basics. Make sure you have good password policies. What's the average? Average person uses the same password over 10 times.
Jeez.
Generally, they're pretty easy to crack. So
Yeah, it's
simple
definitely one of
passwords
the big risks, right, that we see that we have
are a
to.
huge risk.
Yeah.
MFA, and for years, IT security has been an antivirus and a firewall, and that's
Oh,
about
absolutely.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't cut it anymore. You need more than that. And I almost look at people as a new form of firewall. And this is where training is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Technology isn't going to solve security problems.
Yep.
Training has to be a component of it. And it's not the only component. So you have to
Yeah.
focus on both of these things.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, the firewall is a great analogy for people to just get a basic understanding who have a little bit of knowledge of IT. A firewall is there to protect you from bad stuff on the outside. The thing that I feel we have to be careful about when we talk about that is to make sure people don't realize that a human firewall behaves exactly like an internet firewall, where you create the settings and it always does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because people don't, right? Depending on their mood or the emotions or the
Yep.
inputs that they have, it's a really much more complex firewall. But
It definitely is. And it's ever changing. So a lot of groups will do potentially an annual security awareness training. Well,
yeah,
that's better than nothing, but these things change
yeah,
all the time. You need to be continually updating staff and making sure they understand the latest and greatest threats.
yeah,
Because we use this example of COVID. These
yeah,
threats that we're seeing now weren't around just a few months ago.
yeah.
Um, so it takes continued effort, and you can't. It's never going to be a set it and forget it solution.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, I really appreciate your insights into it, Adam, because I've seen news stories. I've seen some anecdotal discussions, amongst my clients, but you see a lot more in the number of clients you have. It's really interesting, and I think important for people to understand how it's affecting especially small businesses that don't have the resources,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to be very judicious with where they spend their security dollars, and they can't afford all of the technology that a bigger company can to protect themselves. So really important to have an MSP like Grade A that can keep those things at the forefront and make sure that you've got the protections that you need for those things. So I guess any topics you'd like to cover, or final tips or thoughts that you have for people in general, as small businesses especially?
Um, I would say people need to obviously take security and in the office seriously, but don't neglect your home life either. You don't want to reuse the same password over and over. A lot of people use the same password at home as in the office, and that's
Yeah,
one way that some people can get compromised from either place.
yeah,
Um, Use a password manager where you can. Use MFA where you can, and not just for your banking solution. Like if the service supports it, try and use it.
Yeah.
That's really important. And look at when you're looking at any solution, try and understand the effort and the impact. I've done talks on many different security areas, and if you can only afford so much or spend so much time, let's look at what has the most impact, and let's do those things first.
Yeah.
Because they can often block the vast majority of threats out there and be pretty cost effective.
Yeah.
And that's just part of making sure you understand the maturity ladder. And every organization is going to be a little bit different and needs a slightly tuned solution. But there's some fundamental truths at all levels for all organizations. Good passwords, good policies, just basics is generally a good starting point.
Excellent. Great advice. Thanks very much, Adam. Appreciate having you on the show today, and we'll look forward to getting people's comments or questions at any time. We'll try to respond to them, and hope everybody stays safe and secure during this time. And who knows when it will end? I don't know that it ever will change back to normal.
Yeah.
But, I think we're all going to be a little bit more aware of it, but being aware in the right context for your business, I think, is really important.
Absolutely.
So I do appreciate your time, Adam, and have a great day.
It was great. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's a wrap for our first episode ever of the Can I Be Phished podcast. I want to encourage you to go to the clickarmor.ca website and explore some of the resources that we have there, some of the fun things that we have there. You can do the Can I Be Phished self-assessment online for free. But if you're an IT manager, love to have a conversation with you about what you need and what it's going to take to get your team engaged to be able to defend themselves. We really are trying to build a cyber herd immunity at ClickArmor. So come back again for our next episode, and we'll talk to you next time. Stay safe and stay secure, and don't be phished.